What is up, Flick Connection? This is Darren, here to help you get more out of movies with another Netflix list, and this time we're going to be talking about some of the best horror movies you can currently watch from different countries. That's right, these are going to be foreign horror movies, but because they're foreign, they're easier to get distributed in the US, and that makes them not just some of the best foreign horror movies on Netflix, that also makes them some of the best horror flicks to have been recently released, period. Now, most of these have been released just in the last couple of years. In fact, just looking at the list, there's really nothing that's not new. So these are going to be brand new, cool flicks. I highly recommend each and every one of them. I'm going to start the list off at number 10 with a movie called Baskin. Now this one is from Turkey. It is by far the darkest, hardest one to watch on the list. It's nightmare fuel. Basically, it's about these cops that venture into a building that essentially is them, without giving too much away, they're descending into hell as they go into this building, and it just has some of the darkest visuals. It's unimaginable how dark this movie is. So, even though I recommend it lightly. And that's why it's at number 10. This is not for everybody. If you're mildly squeamish, you're probably not going to be able to watch this one. That said, if you're getting excited about the way I'm talking about it, this might be one of your number 1 picks off of this list. I just can't do that to everybody. So tread lightly on this one. I'm showing you a little bit. Just be careful. Another just crazy one is Rec 4. I really like the Rec series. They're well worth watching. Each one's different. This one takes place on a ship. This movie is from Spain, along with all the other Rec movies. I recommend checking them out. You might remember a movie that came out in the US years back called Quarantine. I like that one as well. It's sort of a found footage type movie. That was essentially an American remake, almost shot-for-shot remake of the original Rec 1. But Rec 4 is cool. It's not as good as Rec 1. That's why it's at number 9. But it's a cool zombie flick. You're on this sort of somewhat abandoned ship following this group around, and there's some zombies on it. They can run, you know, black eyeballs, screaming, the whole thing. It's got some cool little scenes where, you know, things have to be figured out. So it's entertaining to watch, and the cool thing about it is you're not going to feel like you're watching something you've seen before. It doesn't change the world, but it's fresh enough. At number 8, there's a movie from Iceland called I Remember You. I recommend everyone just check this one out. If you don't mind the subtitles, you're going to have to read for it. It's a supernatural story. It's about a man and a woman that moved to this little remote town to remodel a house, and it's essentially a haunted house. The house has a history. Story you've seen a bunch of times before. It's just really well done. And again, I can't stress enough, because it's foreign, it was made in another country, it wasn't distributed here, it's easier for Netflix to get these movies, which is why it has some of the better, more successful ones. But check out I Will Remember You if you want just a good, solid ghost story with some good visuals. It's fairly up to date, and it's fresh, just like almost everything on this list. Now, way back here at number 7, I've got one everybody was talking about a month ago, and that's called Veronica. And it is also from Spain. It is a solid little possession movie, really solid. In fact, there's nothing negative I can say about it, other than the fact that it might have been a little bit overrated when it first started getting some views on Netflix. But it's solid. It's got some really terrifying visuals that use some practical effects, which I always appreciate. And it's scary. It builds tension well. The only thing about it is it's going to feel familiar. It's going to feel like something you've watched before. But that said, it does everything right. It's familiar, but it does all of those things right. So if you like this sort of possession genre, this is a great one. If that genre scares you at all, this one is probably going to scare you. But if you're scared by The Exorcist, this one might scare you a little bit less, but it's going to get you. Now, number 6, I want to revisit zombies with a movie called Ravenous. Now, this one is French language, but it's actually from Canada. It's filmed mostly in Quebec and some surrounding places. You're out in the woods mostly, and it appears to be maybe a little bit of time after somewhat of a zombie apocalypse. And I say that because the main characters in the movie seem to know what to do. They seem to know how to handle it. They're still struggling. They haven't really like hobbled together and really come together and created like a decent way to live. They're kind of on the move and hiding, but it does involve your fairly typical zombies. They hear you, they come get you, so everyone's having to be very quiet throughout. There's some really creepy visuals of just these zombies kind of standing in a field. That's something they sort of do in this movie, but it's a good one. It's really, really solid, good story. I was sort of under the impression when I started watching it that it was going to be a little funnier than it was. It's not. It's got some comedic relief a couple of times, that's it. It's actually way more bleak than I thought it was going to be, and I think I was just sort of fueled by like its bright color palette. It mostly takes place during the day, and there's a lot of color, which you normally don't get from zombie movies, and so I was a little deceived by that. Not necessarily something they did wrong, but it was just an assumption I made, and I was dead wrong. At number 5, we're going to visit Spain again and do some zombies again with The Bar. Now this one's funnier than Ravenous, but it's really creative. It's about people trapped in a bar during a zombie apocalypse scenario, and it's an interesting story. There's obviously the people trapped in a room sort of dynamics you get from movies like The Mist, but it's got some fun elements to it. You're going to have to read through it, but it works in that context. I think it works really well. So this one's probably the most fun out of any of the ones on the list, and that's why it just sort of lands right there in the middle, because I've said before on this channel, I really like my horror movies to be fun. Not all the time, but this is a great one. If you like this type of content, please click the subscribe button and click that little bell. That way you always get notified when I put a new video out. I put a list like this out at least once a week, always on Wednesday. Now, number 4, we're actually going to visit Jordan, which is not a place we visit very often with horror movies, but Under the Shadow is a really great little Persian language movie that's got some really nice elements. It's going to remind you of movies like The Ring. It's got supernatural elements to it, some terrifying visuals, nothing like Baskin, but it's just a really nicely executed horror movie. Several of you have been asking for me to put this on a list in the comments section. I've been waiting to put it on this list. I think it just finds itself really nicely here at number 4. If you like what you're seeing here in the clips, definitely check this one out. This one might be a good one to start with on the list, as it's not too extreme one way or the other. Now, one that is extreme is Raw from France. This one is about a girl that goes through this transformation, and she needs to consume raw meat, which then becomes flesh. It's really gnarly. It's got a cool, really cool vibe. This one just came out last year. Really cool, edgy vibe to it. Highly recommend it. If you like that sort of, it didn't have an 80s vibe in terms of how it's shot, but it's got some of that, you know, electronic music in it. So it's really got this, I almost hate to say raw edge to it. I really hate puns, but it really does have a raw edge to it. So I recommend it for that reason. If that's your vibe and it's kind of is mine, I recommend this one highly. For number 2, we're going to visit South Korea with The Wailing. Now, this is a really dark movie about a small village where people start to have these bizarre and unexpected deaths. So not only is it a really kind of creepy horror movie, it's also a mystery movie, which I love. That's why it gets the number 2 spot. Because you sort of get that, like, we got, you know, a detective trying to figure out what's going on amongst it being this really kind of frightening scenario. Really great stuff. South Korea puts out some really fantastic movies. A lot of them make it to Netflix, fortunately. I recommend starting to go down that rabbit hole. They put out some really dark movies too, and so much so that the number 1 pick on this list also comes from South Korea. I didn't do that on purpose. There's just no other way these two could shake out, and that is Train to Busan. I'm sorry if you're disappointed at that being number one. The only reason you should be disappointed is because I've talked about it multiple times on this channel, but it really belongs at number one on this list. And that's only been recently confirmed by my sister-in-law and brother-in-law came for a visit recently. We picked this out to watch. Not only did they love it, they were talking over breakfast the next morning about how much they really enjoyed it. So this is just a really cool, action-packed zombie movie. If you want to see a video I did that compares it to World War Z and why Train to Busan is better, you can do that. I'll put a link in the description below. But it's just that. It's a better version of that type of zombie apocalypse. It's not super moody, but it's got some really great scenarios that take place on and off of the train. And it's just really thrilling from beginning to end. Just as you think you're kind of going to catch your breath, the main characters run up against another issue. Just as soon as they solve one problem, they've got another one they've got to fix. So really, really fantastic stuff. If you're new here, hopefully you love this one as much as the rest of us do. If you have additional recommendations for some foreign horror, let us know in the comments below. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. But thanks for watching this one, and you will see me next time.